Hey everybody, it's the ASP.NET Community Stand-Up here on Google Hangouts and YouTube and wherever else this video finds itself. It is February 17th, and we've got John Galloway at home, Dan Roth is working from home, and Damien and Scott Hunter are in the office. John Galloway, community stuff.
Yep, okay, so let me switch over to that real quick. So this is...
Excellent, totally prepared.
Yes! The one downside of having too many screens. It's like, which screen am I sharing? Okay, first of all, Philip W., awesome stuff as always. So here, this is a cool one on overriding filters in MVC6. So nice code, great post, all that. Taisir has a nice post on implementing OAuth JSON Web Token authentication in Web API, and he goes into how this works with ASP.NET 5. Chad Tolkien has had a cool series on MVC5 or ASP.NET 5 and MVC6, and so here he's talking about scaffolding CRUD controllers in MVC. And the last one, not strictly ASP5 related, but community, I'm sneaking it in there. We've got some web and cloud camps going on, and so a post from Dave Voiles. So these will all be in the links at the end. That's it for me.
All right, cool.
That's right.
Let's talk, Dan, why don't you and I talk about what's going on? What are we trying to work out, you and I?
Well, we're trying to work out our docs. What are we going to do for documentation for ASP.NET 5, and honestly for all of the open source projects that we're working on in .NET, for .NET Core, for Roslyn, for F#. How are we going to do docs for all these new open source .NET projects?
And we're doing this we're being really straight with people right now, right? Because we kind of know what we want to do and we kind of know how we want to do it, but we don't know if it's the right thing to do. You know what I mean? Like, we could just do it the old-fashioned way, but at the same time, there's some considerations as far as if we do everything open source, we should go all in and do the docs in the same way.
That's right. If we're going to have open source code, well, we'd love to then have open source docs. Like, we'd like all of our content to be available that people can contribute to, they can edit, and then when you make a change, we'd like those changes to be available in near real time on our websites. But also be great if there were additional doc formats that you could get access to, like offline formats, like PDF files. Can I download the docs as maybe like an EPUB file that I can use in my ebook reader? All those are things that we're trying to think about right now for the new doc system.
Now, what would you say if someone naively, and naively is my word, says, come on, you guys, this is not complicated, just use Markdown, right? Markdown is how you do docs for everything.
Well, the Markdown is great, and we certainly use Markdown for a lot of things. Markdown, I think, is great for like a single page that you basically want to have a lightweight way of creating some HTML. And even for like simple documentation, there are a lot of projects that actually just use a bunch of Markdown files as their documentation. But we're talking about not just small projects. This is all of ASP.NET. We're talking MVC. We're talking Web API, SignalR, .NET Core, all the BCL. We're going to have a lot of content. And we feel like we need something that has a little bit more structure than what Markdown just by itself would give us. Like, how do we create a nice table of contents for all this content? How do we generate nice semantic links not only within the project, but also across multiple projects? So the thinking is we probably need, like, Markdown is good and might even have a place in this system for, like, I just want to create a page in the documentation, but we think we need a little bit more structure, a format that has a little bit more semantics than what Markdown would give us.
Right, right. And if you, like an example, like table of contents, right? If you want to do a table of contents in Markdown, you can type it yourself, but then add 2,000 API docs and thousands of pages of prose, and this thing is going to get quite unruly quite quickly.
That's right. If you have links going across pages, how do you make sure that those links stay, stable and good? Like, how do you keep everything wired up correctly? We think we need a little bit more.
Right. So we've been talking to these folks at readthedocs.org.
Readthedocs.org, that's right. They do fantastic work. You should go see their website. They're basically a service, like Docs as a service. They'll host them for you. They'll build them for you. They'll index them for you so you can have nice index search over your docs. They can handle multiple different versions of your docs. Like if you have your product and you're V1, and then you go to V2 and you want to have version 1 and version 2 of your docs, Read the docs can handle all that. Localization, all these types of concerns. And then the nice thing about them is they're built on top of a documentation system that's been around for a little while and gone through the test of time. They're actually built on top of the Python documentation system. It's called Sphinx, which is using a format called restructured text, which has a lot of those characteristics we're talking about. It has a lot more semantics, the ability to create meaningful directives that can build things like table of contents. You can customize and create your own directives and so forth. So we're looking at them as sort of a model for how we'd like to do docs for ASP.NET 5 and .NET going forward. It's all open source. The system itself is open source, and your docs can be open source, and you get a really nice user experience if you want to contribute changes. You get a nice little link right on each page that says, you want to edit this in GitHub? Go ahead, create a pull request, that whole flow that GitHub makes so seamless. It's just so easy to do with the Read the Doc system. We've actually, I would say, we're experimenting with actually using Read the Docs directly. If you go to github.com/ASP.NET /docs, we set up a sort of initial docs repo inside of our ASP.NET project, and we went ahead and wired that up to Read the Docs. It's now being hosted at aspnet.readthedocs.org. That won't be like the final URL that we'll use, of course, for our docs, but at least for now and for experimenting, it works. And you kind of get a feel and see what it's like to use the Read the Docs system. There's no content there right now. But if someone wanted to submit a pull request with a bunch of docs for ASP.NET 5 for us, you could do that right now. It's totally possible.
And it's important to juxtapose the difference between docs that are prose, right, conceptual documentation and charts and graphs and boxes and lines, and API documentation. Like I did a lot of documentation in NDoc, back in the day, like 10 years ago. We did stuff in NDoc at my last job. And we want to have both. We want to have awesome API documentation, NDoc-style documentation, Sandcastle-style documentation, and we want to have great conceptual docs. What we haven't built yet and what we need to build is this bridge between .NET and what they call the domain, the C# domain or the .NET domain, and Sphinx, the tool underneath Read the Docs. So we're looking at different ways to plug that in, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Sphinx. The nice thing about the Sphinx system, the Python guys, of course, built this for Python originally, but so many people liked it and liked its characteristics. They actually built in support for other languages, like they have support for Ruby, and JavaScript, and Ada, and Haskell, all sorts of languages. They don't actually currently, though, have a plugin for .NET. Surprisingly enough. So we're looking at what it would take to go ahead and just add that to the Sphinx ecosystem. I mean, this isn't to say, I want to be clear that one might ask, well, why the Python doc system? Why not a .NET doc system? The answer there is that we would love to use a .NET documentation system if there was one. We have an immediate need right now to start creating docs and getting docs out there. We want people to be able to contribute. So we view this as sort of a way to get going. But if the .NET community were to rally together and start working on a documentation system that's open source, that supports all these nice features, we'd absolutely be interested in using that or moving to that in the future. But for right now, this system seems to have a lot of the things that we like,
right,
things that we want to use.
And we are looking at NuDoc from the folks at Clarius that made Mock. So this is NuDoq, and possibly using NuDoc as some kind of a bridge to fit, to have the Python stuff call into NuDoc, which then looks at the XML comments and uses maybe brainstorming Roslyn or metadata readers over that. So there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. Hopefully we'll have a public Trello at some point. So like I say, if you want to get involved and watch it happen, we'll do it out in the open, but we don't necessarily know what the ultimate thing will end up looking like. All right, Damien.
Hello, sir.
Deleting email. How are you?
I'm good. Best individuals for you. How are you doing?
All good. Anything interesting check in this week?
So the support for file globbing in the link tag helper landed yesterday. So if you're running off the dev branch super latest on MVC, you can take a look at that. That will be followed by the script tag helper in the following weeks, and then you'll be able to do a nice syntax inside your HTML for having CSS style sheets and having JavaScript files be loaded using glob file paths, also with fallback from a CDN or from anything to anything else, including fallback to glob paths as well.
And reminding people what globbing is.
Globbing
I don't
is
remember.
basically, */star.css.
So it's not simply saying script star.js.
No, it's the globbing is effectively wildcard searching through directories, with double star being the syntax for doing a recursive directory search. So you might see it inside the project.json file if you're doing pack exclude or any of those type of things. And we even use it for finding out the default files to include in compilation. So by default we include all C# files. So we're going to support that on a number of tag helpers as well now, so that you can just say, hey, render me a style sheet link for all the style sheets that you find in this given folder. And similarly for script, for JavaScript as well. So go on.
So, well, as far as like globbing, so I was, wanted to understand. I'd seen the */ and the kind of basic syntax, and I wanted to know more about this, partly because I was arguing with David Fowler late at night, and so I looked, at documentation on globbing on Wikipedia, and it looks like there's a lot of different syntaxes, and I read in there somewhere that it was like there's no definite syntax for globs. Here are some common features. So what is the feature set that we're building?
Just one.
We're
just supporting the ***, the recursive.
Okay.
So we support the concept of includes and excludes. So you could call that two features. So you can say include all files that match any of these patterns, and you can provide more than one pattern. So whatever that might be, it can just be a standard star.css. It could be part of a file name and then a star and then a dot star or a dot whatever extension. And you can use the ** for recursive, and you can have multiples of those. And then you can say, and also exclude any files that match these other patterns.
Okay.
Right?
And so there's star. Is there also question mark? Or
no, we don't support question mark.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. Until someone convinces us that we absolutely have to do that work. For the scenarios that we envisage it'll be used for, we haven't implemented it yet because we don't think we need it.
Great. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Is Hunter still there? Does he have anything he wants to add to the world?
No, he's just hanging out. The other thing I was going to talk about was we started to take a serious look at how we're going to do internationalization and localization in ASP.NET 5 in terms of how you do that for your own apps. And now, obviously, .NET has had a story since the dawn of time, and that story was influenced heavily by how Windows does localization, much other stuff. Now we're going cross-plat, and we're looking at whether we can come up with a new paradigm that plugs on top of the old paradigm and all that type of goodness. We have some working sort of ideas and prototypes right now, and we're kind of fleshing those out by looking at all the areas in MVC and ASP.NET that have to do localization and figuring out how we can plumb those through this new, simpler abstraction. So one of the things that's always bugged me about localization in ASP.NET is that typically the process, you start out with your default language, which might be English. You have a whole bunch of strings in your views or your pages, and then you go through and you remove all that, and you change all that with a whole bunch of calls into a static class and static property names, and then you just kind of lose the ability to look at your source file and have any idea of what's actually being said. So that's something that we'd really like to fix. So the prototype we have right now, or the suggestion we have, is that by default, the default locale string, so the English string, if you're doing English, would still be in the document, and it would actually act as the key for looking up the current culture strings from the resources. So that's one thing we're doing. It'd be wrapped in a new interface, which we're still playing with at the moment. It would obviously have to be plugged into all the various aspects of MVC, and then we would have a new piece of middleware that you would compose in your ASP.NET 5 request pipeline, which would be doing the job of sort of auto setting the current culture for the request based on a bunch of different bits of information, including the accept language header that's sent by the browser, which could include more than one language, and could also include priorities. Also supporting a cookie-based override, so that if you want to have some type of UI on your website where you click a thing and say, hey, I want to hard code my experience to be French, then that would just write a cookie, and then the middleware would honor the cookie. And then there'd be like the escape hatch, which is, well, I just want to run this delegate, and I want to set the culture for the current request based on the current user in some record in the database or something, and maybe we would update ASP.NET identity to support the concept of setting a culture by default. So yeah, we're looking at all that right now. That's interesting.
I think one of the fears when someone's designing a new framework is that maybe we'll do something that is not that prevents something from being possible. Are there any chances that, like, if someone doesn't like something about the way we do internationalization, that they won't be able to swap it out and plug in something totally different?
Hey, yeah, hello, kid. If we, smooth. If we, well, I mean, obviously that's the intent. The goal is that whatever we come up with is something that is pluggable, like all the other abstractions that we've created in ASP.NET 5, like iLogger and iLogger Factory can be backed by any logging implementation. Our DI implementation can be backed by anything. This would be no different. The way that it would be exposed would be by the DI system, and so if you don't want to use it, you can just put your own resource story inside DI and resolve that out. And if you don't even want to do that, you could just do the old-fashioned thing and just use static classes with static properties like we do in .NET today, and just have that go through to the underlying resource manager capability inside .NET, which is sort of hard-coded just to pull stuff out of resx files or embedded resources. So yeah, so no, you shouldn't. Hopefully, anything we do will, you'll be able to either use it, you'll be able to plug in behind it, or you'll be able to throw it all out completely and do whatever you like yourself.
Cool. So there's no one-way dead-end streets in ASP.NET 5.
Well, that's the intent. I'm not going to promise it. I mean, there's always something. We have limited time, limited engineering, limited resources, and sometimes we overlook something, or someone comes up with an scenario.
It's just the goal to being able to build new streets is all we're looking for.
I will say that a lot of our types, our intrinsics, are much lighter or leaner than they used to be. So, like, for example, a lot of our base types have a very few base members, and then we add a lot of extra functionality with extension methods, where it's not necessary to have those things in the base type because they're really just a nice syntax to put on top. And a lot of the times you can just replace complete implementations because we're using interfaces for the contracts for a lot of the basic functionality that's shared throughout the framework. And if you don't like it, don't use it, or plug something else in that works better. There's going to be cases, unfortunately, given the nature of the beast, where we come up with some contract, we plumb it through, we have a default implementation, but the contract doesn't allow for some scenario. Hopefully, we've minimized those things, but it's inevitable that there'll be something that someone somewhere on the planet will want to do, and they'll go, curse ASP.NET, I can't do this thing I want to do. And we'll go, well, innovate your own contract and plumb that through instead. The worst case is where we have some intrinsic that relies on that contract and you can't make it do what you want to do, but if the contract's not written that way, there's nothing anyone else can do about it anyway. So we're doing our best.
All right.
Yeah.
Anything else as we wrap up? Gentlemen?
All right. Today?
I don't see any.
No, I'm not there.
No questions.
Okay. This has been the 17th of February's ASP.NET Community Stand-Up. As always, we are on Twitter, we are on Facebook, and for both of you on Google+, we are here for you, and we will see you again next week.
Dramatic zoom out.
Dramatic zoom out. That was good. We got it right this time. I actually switched it. Yes. Yeah. Nice job.